today's presentation. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Duffield. I'm here at Wested in our California office, and I'm your host today for today's webinar, Bringing Coherence in the Age of the Common Core, One Rochester Schools Journey. And we're really excited to have you on this webinar today, and we'll really invite you into participating in the chat window with us. And if you've just joined us, please feel free to type in the introduction. And as you're doing that, it's my great pleasure to hand it over to Matthew Nathan, who will give you a little bit of an overview about Wested and our mission. Matthew?
Thank you, Julie, and good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know, Wested is a national, not-for-profit education, research, development, and services organization, and our focus is on promoting excellence, achieving equity, and improving learning for children, youth, and adults. And our work in this area spans from cradle to career. Today we'll be talking a lot about the work that is going on within some really important things that we're doing with our K-12 school partners. But Wested also works at an early childhood level, providing high-quality sort of tools and supports and professional learning for early childhood educators and policymakers, all the way up through college and career, working with adult learners, community colleges, and universities, building a talent pipeline. So we encourage you to visit us at www.wested.org to learn more about the breadth of Wested's offerings and how download some of our free knowledge publications, because we're really about bringing knowledge to the field. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn it back over to the team here so we can learn together from the work that Rochester is doing. Thanks so much, Julie.
Thanks, Matthew. And for those of you who have just joined, I was quickly reviewing in the standby mode some of the ways we'll interact today. We have a quick write, which means that you'll type into the chat during the assigned times, or actually we invite you anytime to use the chat to type in your reflections and your questions. We'll be doing some quick polling, and I'll push one out very shortly to ask a roll poll. But we also have these quick polls, which you just use to let us know that you have sound, and they're on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. So you just let us know that you have sound by clicking on the green check, and we'll be asking you to do some of those quick check-in polls. And we'll be breaking to respond to questions and comments throughout the presentation. If you're having any difficulties getting on, please email eventhelp@wested.org, and we will send you a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. So we'll just push out. We really do encourage this as a time for us to also get to know you. So we invite you to share in the chat your own experiences, and if you could just hit *6 to mute your phone, and we'll invite you in at different times. Also, please feel free, if you haven't already done so, to type in an introduction to the poll with a little bit about your affiliation. So we're moving forward now to push out a roll poll. So if you could see the poll, will pop on the bottom right-hand side of your screen and give us a little bit more about what your specific role is. And if it's other, please feel free to type in the chat. So looking at the chat here, we'll publish that results. We have two people who said school site coach, a lot of people answering others. So if you could go up to the window and type in, thank you, like Will did, consultant writer, type into the other box, that would be fantastic. So thank you, everyone, for doing that poll. I'm now going to move forward. So I see today that lots of folks joining us from many different roles. Thank you, April says parent education. So I am now handing it over to Bob. Bob, it's over to you. Bob Rosenfeld is the Senior Manager of the Field Services here at Wested. And Bob, would you like to move forward?
Yes, thank you so much, Julie. As Julie mentioned, I manage the field services here at Wested, and as Matthew mentioned, Wested, although the name would imply it's on the West, we're actually a national and even international organization, and we've been providing services to schools most recently, of course, around the Common Core, which everybody's interested in, and we're always looking for compelling stories out there, schools that are that are transforming, in the process of transforming, going through some of the same struggles that all of us are going through. And so I was speaking to many of our colleagues at WestEd about stories that they felt were compelling. And Terry Hoffer, who will be joining us here today. Terry, can you just say a quick hello so that people can hear your voice?
Hi, this is Terry. Good afternoon, everyone.
Terry is one of our school transformation coaches, who's one of our field service staff who's out there working with schools across the country. Terry's concentrating his work in the Rochester area. And Terry came to me with a compelling story of Rochester Community School, number 3 in the Rochester City School District. And so he spoke with Rodney Moore, who the principal is glad to join us here today. Rodney, can you say a quick hello so people can hear your voice?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. And so Rodney's going to be sharing his expertise and also his story with us. And really that's what today is all about. You're going to get the opportunity to hear from some experts in the field. You're also going to get the opportunity to hear their story and the opportunity to ask your own questions in the chat area. And possibly even at the end, we'll be able to take some voice calls as well with questions that you might have. So once again, today is a day to hear from the field. And we're also very fortunate to have today from WestEd, Kathy Dunn out of our East Coast Boston office, who brings a wealth of experience to school transformation, has been working with schools for many years, have been WestEd since the mid-90s, and is been quite helpful in this transition that we've been making to the Common Core. So we're so happy to have Kathy today. Kathy might have her phone muted right now. Kathy, if you're not on mute, can you just say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone, and glad to be here with you all.
Great. Thank you. It's wonderful to have you here. So just a little bit about our time here together today for the next 45 minutes or so. Again, we're going to hear a little bit about the partners on this journey that I've mentioned, this compelling story. So we're going to hear a little bit about the partners being WestEd, and in this particular case, Nathaniel Rochester Community School. We're going to hear a little bit about them. We're going to hear about Rodney's story in particular arriving at the school, and that will make a little more sense here in a moment. We're going to give you a chance to ask questions about that. Then we're going to get into a little bit of the journey that Rodney and his school have been going through. Again, give you a chance to ask questions about that. And then we're going to talk about next steps, because everybody's wondering about where do we take this next. And so we're going to hear about Rodney's particular story, but give you an opportunity to chime in with where you are in your journey and where you think your school or your organization, in whatever role you might be, is going next. So I'm going to hand things over momentarily here, just for one moment, to Terry. Terry, can you tell us a little bit about how WestEd came to partner with Nathaniel Rochester Community School?
Thanks, Bob. WestEd was invited to partner with the Rochester City School District last summer as part of the school's school improvement grant. So Nathaniel Rochester Community School was the recipient of a 3-year school improvement grant beginning with the 2013-14 school year. WestEd started its engagement late September, early October, and specifically to assist the school with 2 major initiatives. One, a STEM initiative, a commitment to transition the school to a STEM magnet school within 3 years. The second, an expanded learning opportunity. The school is embarking on an effort to expand the school day by 300 hours per year. And so we're about halfway through the first of this 3-year engagement. And I'd like to just share with you a little bit about the principal. Principal Rodney Moore was hired by the Rochester City School District just about a month before WestEd's engagement. The school had very stable leadership for the past decade or so with the same principal, and so Rodney began working with the district. He's an interesting candidate for the work. He previously served as a principal of a 1,400 student middle school in Virginia. It was a high-performing school, and I guess an important aspect to today's story is the fact that Rodney was hired after the initial school improvement grant had been created, developed, and submitted. So So he jumped in after the fact, and that as you'll hear, that becomes an important piece to this story.
Great, thank you so much. Just on a quick technical note, Julie, I was advancing the slides. Just want to make sure everybody's in fact seeing the picture of Rodney at this point. Is that the case?
Yes.
Julie? Okay,
yes.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
Yes, Bob,
Thank
I'm
you so
just me moving it forward. We've got Rodney.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, if we could go to the next slide, please. All right, before we hear this story that Rodney's going to tell us and about arriving at his school, if you could go to the next slide, please. I'd like just to hear a little bit about those of us who are joining us today on this webinar. And so if you could please do what we call a quick write in the chat area. Just quickly tell us what brings you here today and something that you'd like to learn and something that you'd like to contribute based on your own experiences. So if you could just do a quick chat here, either answer all three questions or choose one that you think you've got the most to share. Just to make sure that those listening have been able to hear this, if you could please use the green check mark just to give us a little check if you are in fact currently typing something in the chat area, and we should wait for you to continue typing before we move on. So please give us a green check if you're currently typing and would like for us to wait for you to finish typing.
So Bob, we have some folks, Jacqueline, and we'll post it in the chat.
Excellent, thank you.
Will says, help districts transition to the Common Core, and I'm interested in the success stories from other districts.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, of course, Common Core is on all of our minds at this point in time. One of the things that we've discovered doing a lot of this work is that many of the systems that need to be put into place into a school they're the same systems that existed and we talked about before the Common Core. Common Core gives us the motivation to really step up and do the things that we've been talking about doing for many years. So a lot of the things you'll be hearing about today, you'll be saying, gosh, that's just good things that should be going on in a school no matter what. Just keep in mind that it's the Common Core that's provided the opportunity or the impetus to put those things really into practice. So I just want to make that quick point here. All right.
So Bob, you see all
Excellent.
those. Thank you, everyone.
I see some questions. Yeah, I see some questions here about demographics, and I believe that we have a slide coming up here about that. We're going to allow Rodney to tell a little bit more of the demographics of the school here in a moment. And people want to hear stories about what's been hard or easy about Common Core. I'm sure we'll certainly be hearing some of that. Family involvement, I am sure we'll be hearing some of that. Wonderful, wonderful. I think we have a lot of good information there. Those of you who were putting the green check marks in the participant area there, letting us know that you were typing, I see that those check marks are gone now. Everybody appears to have finished typing what they wanted to share. So if we could go to the next slide, please. Terry, I'm going to hand things over to you to hand things over to Rodney to tell us a little bit more about his school.
Sure. Rodney?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me today. Nathaniel Rochester Community School, it's a kindergarten through 8th grade school of about 650 students. It's located in the Cornhill neighborhood near downtown Rochester. As you see with the demographics, our school is composed mostly of African American students, and that makes up about 85% of our population. I saw a question about our English language learner population. A very quickly growing segment of our population. Right now it's about 10% of our population, and approximately 16% of our students also receive special education services as well. You can see by our math proficiency and our ELA proficiency scores that we do have significant challenges when it comes to ELA and math, which is why we are partnering with WestEd to help us determine what are some of the reasons that those things are happening, and to help us prioritize some of the steps that we can take to hopefully help us overcome some of those challenges.
And thank you, Rodney. And this time I want to just ask you a few questions to help folks understand a little bit more about your school and the
To
current
unmute
state.
your line, press *6
slide,
or
please.
#6.
Rodney, the first thing I want to ask you is to talk to us a little bit about what you were dealing with when you first arrived in the school last August and as the school year started in September.
Well, I think the first challenge was I arrived in August and school started in September. That was the first challenge. But when I came on board in August, I found that, the school had lots of resources available through the School Improvement Grant to hopefully make some significant changes at Nathaniel Rochester. But there were also some changes that occurred right at the beginning of the school year that created a couple of obstacles for us as well. About 3 weeks before the school year started, we had a time change, a start time change. Originally, our school day was to start at 7:30 a.m., but we moved to a 9:30 a.m. start 3 weeks before the school year started. So that presented significant challenges for many people in the school community, not only our teachers, but our parents and students as well. Many of our staff members and our families had made plans around our school time with child care or job situations, and because of the time change, we had to make some quick adjustments. And there were people in the community, parents and students, that because of that could no longer attend our school, so we had some of our student population transfer to other schools. And then even within our staff, we had staff members, again, that had set their schedules around their start time, and so we had several staff members that had to make a transition to another school as well. And so some of that shakeup right at the beginning was a little hard to deal with, but we quickly recovered. We were able to hire some top-notch teachers and to carry on some of the initiatives that we had started.
Okay. And so, Ronnie, with respect to your late start, a lot of the questions that have come in have had to do, of course, with the Common Core. Just by way of initial context, can you speak to any specific initial activities that you were involved in with respect to the Common Core, both in the weeks leading up to the start of the school year?
Mm-hmm. Well, being from Northern Virginia, Virginia was a state that did not use Common Core, and so Common Core was new to me as well, and so I was learning what Common Core was all about. And it's a visceral reaction when you hear the word Common Core from a lot of people. And so many people really mix up Common Core standards and Common Core curriculum and, mix those two things up. There have been a couple of different messages when it came to Common Core within the city school district, whether or not it was mandatory that there was a specific curriculum used to deliver the Common Core. Could we build our own curriculum around Common Core standards? And so some of those inconsistencies caused confusion, and being that Common Core was new itself, people are already a little, afraid when it comes to change. And so that made it even a little more challenging for people to implement it with fidelity and then to be able to take those standards and make them their own in a sense, because if we're now implementing the Common Core, we want to make sure we do it the right way.
So if I could have the next slide, Rodney, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your immediate assets. And as you talked about how people reacted to the Common Core, I'm noticing some of the feedback coming in from our messages, and thank you, everybody. Some folks have a concern with, of course, how parents are dealing with and reacting to Common Core. I wanted to ask you specifically about how your teachers, and the next question, of course, is what were your immediate assets? And I know you inherited a staff with many talented teachers. Mm-hmm. How did your teachers deal with the Common Core? What was their initial reaction, at least when you entered the building? And perhaps we'll get into a little bit how that reaction may have changed over time.
Well, again, I have a very dedicated staff, and that's one strength that I think is going to help us get over this challenge of student achievement. But our teachers, again, had just received a message about delivering the Common Core that, we had to use the Engage New York modules to deliver it, or they didn't have to use the Engage New York modules. And so some teachers were confused whether or not they had to follow those or not. And so we asked for a little clarity whether or not we needed to follow those modules, and we were told we didn't. Now, because some of our staff members were actually trainers when it came to Common Core delivery, some of them continued to use the modules and to do it with fidelity and have found great success with it, while others have really taken a look at the standards within the Common Core and try to make lots of the lessons very relevant to our students and our student population.
Thank you. Bob, I turn it back over to you briefly.
Thank you. So just looking in the chat area here, I think you've done a wonderful job of answering some of the questions. Somebody was asking about those Engage New York modules, and so we've heard a little bit about that. And it sounds like you really allowed, we talked about negotiables and non-negotiables, Rodney. Let's talk a little bit more about that. You said that teachers were not mandated to use the Engage New York units, but they could use them if they chose to. Tell us a little bit more about how that came to be.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Could you say that one more time, please?
A little bit more information. People are wondering about the Engage New York units, and you talked briefly about how some teachers were under the impression they had to use them, some weren't. Let's stay on the positive. What sort of positive discussions has that led to between teachers? Because I think one of the most positive aspects of this transition to the Common Core is that it provides, again, that motivation and the opportunity for teachers to talk to each other about instruction, about curriculum, about learning. What were some of the positive discussions that came out of that?
Oh, well, first of all, just the discussions themselves, it's given us the opportunity for teachers to have dialogue about curriculum and about standards and around these standards, and hopefully create a collaborative culture, I'll say, where we see what's working in one class and what may not be working in another class, and teachers have the opportunity to share those best practices and then use those best practices to make sure that all students are learning. So that's one great thing. Also, we know that if they use the Engage New York modules, that those modules are aligned with the Common Core standards. And so if a teacher is using the modules, they know that they're not going to go wrong, in a sense.
Right. Wonderful. I think that makes perfect sense. Wonderful. So really what it comes down to is that that all students are learning. We talk about, quote, doing the Common Core, but it's not really about doing the Common Core. It's about making sure that we've created a school culture and a climate where all students are learning, where all teachers care for all students. It so happens to be the Common Core is what is providing the fuel for that conversation. But what it really comes down to, as many people were talking about special ed, people were talking about English learners, about all of your students, it's really an opportunity in ensuring that all students have an opportunity, an equal opportunity to learn.
And
wonderful.
In a district like ours, equity is so important because there have been so many situations where kids aren't given those equitable educational opportunities, and so with the Common Core, that is provided.
Perfect. All right, next slide, please. All right, and the journey begins. So, Terry, if you could take it over from here and speak to Rodney about the journey.
Sure. To begin with, WestEd's process in supporting schools through the transformation effort is, as I said from the top, we look at it, at least in this case, as a 3-year effort. And we started with a comprehensive needs assessment as a starting point. As you see from the slide on the screen, of course, 4 steps in this continuous improvement cycle, beginning with the needs assessment, followed by an action plan, implementation and monitoring and an evaluation. And just briefly, the needs assessment that WestEd conducted for this particular school included focus groups, interviews, classroom visits, and a school-wide survey. The report was probably 70 pages or so and yielded 69 recommendations. The recommendations were clustered around WestEd's characteristics of highly effective schools. But before I share with you about the characteristics of highly effective schools, on the next slide, just a few questions. And again, I just wanted to thank folks. If you could, please share where you are in this stage of your own journey and what you need at this stage. And feel free to pick and choose any or all of the questions on the screen. Again, it helps us in tailoring our our story about what's going on in the school to better fit your needs. And while you're doing that, I think I noticed there were some questions that came in about special education and English language learners. Rodney, just wanted to, again, while folks are taking a look at those questions and have an opportunity to type those in, is there anything you want to say about the services to special education English language learners?
Well, I see that a couple of people are asking about the demographic again. Our English language learner population makes up about 10% of our population right now, but it's probably our fastest growing part of our population as well. Several of our English language learners come in as level 1 students as well, and so we have several non-English speaking students that do come in to our school. As far as students receiving special education services, that makes up about 16% of our population, and this is very close to the district percentage, which is around between 16 and 18% as well.
All right, and we're of course, Rodney is now reading through the questions that are coming in, and I'm going to give him a chance in a minute to touch on some of those as time permits. While he's doing that, if we couldn't go to the next slide, please, I just want to share a brief overview with the folks on the line about the characteristics of highly effective schools. So step one in our process was to categorize needs around key characteristics. So the characteristics of highly effective schools that WestEd utilizes is, in the transformation process is on the next slide. We have 10. The 10 characteristics are based on WestEd's review of the literature on student achievement that shows that high-performing schools share. Again, the needs assessment process provides for us a framework for working with the school, working with Rodney and his staff. And that framework is then used to match what's going on in the building with what's going on in high-performing schools across the country. And for some of you, there may be different similar frameworks, of course, that you use. But Rodney, I invite you at this time to talk to us a little bit about what the process felt like as the principal in terms of sharing information from you and from your staff around the characteristics, and again, I invite you to weave in answers to some of the questions that are on the minds of our participants today.
Well, I see a lot of the questions have to deal with time and time for collaboration, and that's going to be a part of my response. Basically, when we look at this, school transformation, I wanted to make sure that we had representation from different parts of our school. Our school is unique in the sense that we have students that are in kindergarten and students who are in 8th grade, and so the needs of these students is, I would say, varied at the least. And so we wanted to make sure that we had representation from our primary area, from our elementary area, and then from our middle school area, as well as representation from our special areas and from our co-curricular areas as well. Because when it came to making sure we were identifying what we needed to do to move our school, we wanted to make sure that everyone had a say in that, because you do want ownership when it comes to that. And so I made sure that we had representation for all of these, and we got together as a group, and we were able to look at, what was important as a school, what was important to us, what do we think were the main reasons that our students may not be performing. And so we had the opportunity to work with WestEd through survey data, through small group meetings, our whole school community, not just our teachers and our students, but our parents as well, and other community members coming in and giving that information. And when that information or that data was received, we were able to take all of this information and then try and whittle it down to those 3 to 5 most important things that we saw we needed to address as a school community.
And Rodney, as that process occurred of whittling it down, is there a particular area where there was a lot of tension, and if you could tell us a little bit about why.
Well, it was funny too, because there had been I would say angst when it came to our time change at the beginning of the year and some of the issues and challenges that it caused when it happened. And so when we all saw the 10 characteristics of highly effective schools, and we saw that effective and efficient use of time was one of them, and kind of garnered a chuckle within the group. But definitely, that was a challenge, our time, because we didn't have a set time for professional development in order to, for us to learn as a collaborative group in order to plan some of these changes that we need to make. The one thing I can say that we did still have was we had some time during the day for our teachers to collaborate. We did have, and I see questions we're asking about collaborative time during the day for teachers, and we do have collaborative time during the day for teachers. Not as much as I would like for our elementary teachers, because they have, I would say, probably during the day 35 to 40-minute period that they can work on a daily basis. Our upper school teachers have a little more time, but they also have daily planning as well, collaborative time that they can use.
Rodney, there's some questions coming in around sort of the use of time and perhaps as that intersects with the Common Core. Can you talk to us a little bit about how teachers use time for purpose of discussing the Common Core?
Yes, the teachers work in grade level teams, and so they're able to take either the Common Core standards or to take the Engage New York modules and to use those to discuss how they're going to deliver the curriculum. We actually have had Dr. King come to our school to see our 5th grade math team and 5th grade math and 5th grade ELA team deliver the Common Core and to use the modules, and he was very impressed with what was happening, because the modules themselves are a resource. It's a great resource that is aligned with those standards. But I think what happens in our school, the teachers are able to make those modules relevant by adding, by adjusting, to make sure that it's meeting the need of our student population.
Wonderful. If we could go just again briefly to the next slide, I wanted to just share again very briefly. Mentioned initially that the framework that was used to help match what was currently taking place at Nathaniel Rochester School with 10 characteristics of high-performing schools, it was actually broken down further into 75 components. Just to give you a sample of it here, there were actually 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 5 different aspects that West Ed looked at in relation to what was taking place at Nathaniel Rochester, just to give you a sense. So we looked at is adequate time and space available for professional collaboration and analysis of student performance and related data. And again, whether you use this framework or another framework, that's something that certainly is important. And we looked at non-purpose time, adequate time allocated for academic subjects, and time for enrichment activities, of course, the length of the school day, bell schedule, calendar, et cetera. So the next step, though, if we could have the next slide, was prioritizing the needs. Again, again, the process itself can look and feel very overwhelming, especially as for a school like Nathaniel Rochester that had been, again, had relatively stable leadership over the years, and then massive changes perhaps on the horizon due to the Common Core, the new leadership, the school improvement grant effort, the STEM implementation, the ELT, and all of the needs. And so from a perspective of building coherence, one of the things where we spent, I won't say considerable time, but considerable focused time was in building cohesion and building cohesiveness around a very, very limited number of specific strategies and actions to work on. So on the next slide, I wanted to share with participants today. Just again, we wanted to keep it very simple, but one of the key aspects of the work here was to create ownership. So it was very important that everybody involved had the opportunity to participate, and I'll say in a somewhat selfish way, because the work being done at the school was deeply personal. So to validate the needs of individuals, the initial criteria for prioritizing recommendations in the school was sufficiently flexible to allow and encourage each individual to assess worth from their own position where they sit. Individuals were encouraged to look at the recommendations based on what was most likely to advance the mission of the school, but from the position of where they sit. And again, I think one of the themes that's been emerging today is dialogue and teacher collaboration, both around the Common Core and all areas of curriculum instruction, assessment, and even school operations. But ultimately, after asking teachers to rate each of the recommendations as a 3 or a 2 or a 1, then further directions in terms of narrowing it further down, we invited teachers to identify areas that were potentially high leverage and had the potential to create a cascading effect that could positively impact other areas. So by way of an example, we've been talking a lot about time. If the school found a way to more efficiently use time and or create more and better teacher collaboration time, common planning time, that would enable for more and greater discourse and dialogue related to the Common Core and other areas. Next slide, please. And again, folks, thanks for your those folks writing in the chat area. Both Rodney and I continuously scanning those, and we'll weave in answers to your questions as time permits. The next aspect that we focused on, again, somewhat related to time, was deciding whether or not these items were now were for now or later. And again, here we are halfway through the first year of a 3-year transformation effort, and we asked the school to consider: can the recommendation be completed within 90 days? Or does it make sense to work on the recommendation now or later? And I invite Rodney to jump in on that.
Well, I think one positive and negative with the process, you want to make sure that you have all stakeholders at the table when we are going through these recommendations and trying to prioritize and decide what's the most important thing. But at the same time, that creates a challenge itself, because each individual stakeholder is looking at the recommendation from their vantage point. So what may be more important to one stakeholder may not be as important to another stakeholder. So as a group, we had to make sure that we could come to a consensus on what was the most important and what had to take priority over something else.
Rodney, anything come to mind perhaps that that may have seemed important at the moment that was perhaps postponed until next year?
New teachers. Because of the staff change that we were going through and having to hire new teachers, we know that we had to have a more robust teacher induction program. But that's not what's most important right now. That's something I think we have to put off until later on. We start hiring, start looking at new teachers. But right now, other things have to take importance. And so we had to look at that as it's very important, but that's not a priority right at this second.
Terrific. And again, next slide, please. Rodney, anything with respect to capacity? Were there any changes that you'd like to make now that perhaps you didn't have capacity to do all the first year?
Well, a part of our school improvement grant is to challenge us to become a STEM magnet school in the next 3 years. And so with some of the funding from the school improvement grant, we were able to create new positions to help support that effort. We were able to hire a STEM specialist, able to hire 3 inquiry teachers to serve different parts of the school, and able to hire intervention teachers as well. And so that team came on board, I would say, the end of January, maybe the beginning of February, but have hit the ground running. As a matter of fact, we're in Connecticut right now instead of in Rochester, visiting a couple of STEM schools. One STEM school that just opened newly as a STEM school, and another STEM school that's in a similar situation as we are, transforming from a school into a STEM school.
Okay, perfect. And again, we're taking a look at your questions, and while we do that, just touch on this one question came in, Rodney: is Rochester adopting next generation science standards as part of becoming a STEM magnet?
Right, and as a STEM magnet school, our school is taking a closer look at the next generation science standards and using that in developing our program, using those to develop our program.
Okay, and again, inviting folks to write in anything else that might be on your mind. Rodney.
Great. I see a question here, Terry, that has been asked, and some similar questions talking about how you guys were able to increase the co-planning and or the expanded daytime with standing contracts in place.
With our expanded day program, it's voluntary for teachers to stay for the expanded day portion of our school day. Teachers are compensated if they'd like to. We had planned on a larger percentage of our teachers being involved in that expanded day portion, just because we knew that academic support was really needed. With the expanded day, we offer academic support, social emotional support, and we offer recreational supports for our students. Teachers are compensated for that time. As we're creating the schedule for next year, we're looking at incorporating more of those academic supports, and so we really do need our staff members to be a part of that. But now that we know exactly what our time is going to be as far as our school day and our start time, a large percentage of our teachers have decided that they are going to take part of that, and so I think that will be beneficial for our kids.
Great. Thank you to everybody for asking your questions here. I've reviewed the questions. Terry, Rodney, do you see any other questions at this point?
We're looking over right
now. A question coming here about planning towards the future. This is a little ways out. You've just begun. But looking down the road when the funding ends, I think this really comes down to a question of putting into place systems that will outlive any particular grant. What thoughts have you given, Terry and Rodney, to that everything that you do needs to be something that will outlive the grant, outlive the grant?
Well, sustainability is critical. And we have been working with the National Center for Time and Learning also to help us to at least think about how we're going to sustain and make sure that we are a STEM school even when this funding is taken away. And so with much of the funding now and with the additional positions and the trainings and the development that we can offer with our resources, we're building internal capacity that's going to allow us to be able to take some of those supports away, but yet our staff will be trained. For instance, we're working with the University of Rochester right now to work with our classroom teachers on inquiry-based instruction. Now, we won't have them as a partner after the grant goes away, but again, our teachers will then be trained, and so we won't need that support. And so we're doing things like that to try and make sure that, our capacity is built and we'll be able to sustain this effort even after, the grant money is taken away.
So it sounds to me like you're doing more than just putting into place programs. You're putting into place, really, you're establishing a culture. So it's not that you're buying an inquiry-based program. What you're doing is you're creating an inquiry-based culture in the school that will outlive staff changes or funding source changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. All right. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Great.
And
Terry?
yes, Bob. Next, we wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about how the process transitioned from, again, the initial needs assessment, prioritizing those recommendations, and this is the point. The school next went through a process of creating an action plan, and the next slide, please. Share with you just some initial steps in that action planning process. The school was asked to create, for each of the half dozen or so priority recommendations that they came up with, the school was asked to create committees, either existing or new, which might lead the work. Again, in the interest of creating coherence, the idea here was not to spin off new committees all over the school, but when possible to assign a certain body of work to an existing committee, to create a champion or champions to ensure that progress is made. Again, many of the folks carrying the ball here were teacher leaders that Rodney identified, not necessarily teachers within the school that had, let's say, formal, positional authority. These were teacher leaders who were putting in extra time and energy to serve as champion and to encourage their colleagues to do so. and then a timetable for implementing the work. The initial action plan is really developed around 90 days. The idea here was that this is a 3-year implementation. It was clear that there were things that needed to take place over the course of 3 years, but the focus for late in the first year is what can be accomplished now. What's a manageable amount of work that can be accomplished now, but done well and done with fidelity. And then finally, gathering relevant input from the group about specific tasks, challenges, etc. In other words, having dialogue and discourse up front in a group on chart paper so that any potential challenges can be talked about first. Many of the things that were discussed are not, these aren't easy fixes. These weren't action items where a box could easily be checked off and say we did it. So WestEd encouraged a process where the school was able to talk about potential challenges so that teachers didn't get down or depressed when, in fact, they encountered those challenges going forward. Okay, and so up on your screen we have a multiple choice poll. Bob, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, if people could please take a chance to think about it. We've talked about a lot here. I want to give everybody a chance to once again look at these 10 characteristics that Terry shared a moment ago of high priority schools and give you a moment to think about if you could choose one of these to be a top priority to work on at your school. We're curious about which you would choose, if you could choose one to focus on, or if you work with a school or a district in your capacity, which of these do you think would be most important to work with initially? So please take a moment to go ahead and answer by clicking one of the radio buttons there next to the choices in the poll question window.
While that's going on, I see there's a question, how does inquiry-based learning fit in with the Common Core?
And I think in particular they talked about fitting with the Common Core and with the idea of, quote, following Engage New York modules. Rodney, can you talk a little bit about that, this idea that you're instilling a culture of inquiry-based learning? How do the Engage New York units or modules fit into that?
Well, again, this is where our teachers have the opportunity to make those adjustments that go along with us transitioning into a STEM magnet school. I saw where one of the questions before had to deal with was how were students responding to the initiatives, and I can tell you that the response so far has been tremendous. A quick example, we just came off of our spring break a couple of weeks ago, and maybe 3 weeks before spring break, our STEM team created and designed a STEM camp for spring break, and wanted to offer that opportunity to our teachers and to our students. Being that this was the first time, we were all concerned, of course, that we wouldn't have lots of participation. But many of our teachers were already working with the University of Rochester in designing the program. And so we contacted parents, we put letters out, we invited parents in to tell them what this was about. And we're very surprised that we had 32 students over spring break come in and take part in our 3-day STEM camp. So very successful. Students love to ask questions. I mean, they're naturally inquisitive. And so we have our partners from the University of Rochester that come in and work with our teachers. They model lessons with the teachers, create fishbowl lessons. Other teachers can come in and watch them. Lots of hands-on activities. We're so used to, in education, I think, making sure that we have the right or wrong answer. You know, training teachers and training students to have them know that, you know, it's okay if the answer isn't right. We just want to make sure that we can find the right answer going through this process. And so kids now are taking those chances that they didn't before because they don't have to worry about I'm right or am I wrong, because I know we're going to find the answer together using the resources that we have.
Thanks, Rodney. We're looking at the results from the poll. Thanks to folks who indicated your opinion on the poll. Looks like again, folks spending time and energy in a variety of different areas. I guess what's important is to take the time, like we have today, to talk and think on that. Next slide, please. And again, we're going to roll. We're a few minutes behind. We're going to, again, looking at I think we've touched on most of what's coming through by way of the chat areas. If we could go to the next slide.
Yes, I think we've done a good job answering those questions as they came in. Julie, do you see anything that we have not answered?
There's a question from Terry with the I about relative to sustainability issue about having teachers who are champions to be used as coaches once the financial support for the initiative ends. Is that some thinking about, as Rodney and all are doing this process, that might happen, I guess he's asking.
Right now we're grooming our teacher leaders to make sure that as this year goes on, each one teach one can happen. And so teachers will then go into their grade levels and work with other teachers that weren't involved in what we call our cohort 1 program. And so our teachers will be able to help sustain this until this just becomes a part of our culture, not a program anymore.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next slide. Thank you. I think that's a perfect segue into the road ahead.
Sure. So the road ahead, the work is now transitioning to implementation teams. The priority areas are being actively worked on by each of these teams. Next slide, please. And Rodney, just briefly, if you could here, talk about significant challenges that you envision over the next academic year.
Well, I think that it's going to be critical because, this really jumped quickly at everyone this year. With me coming in new, with the charge from the school improvement grant, with the funding, with the new positions, I think it's critical as we finish this year that we begin thinking about educating our entire school population into exactly what a STEM magnet school is going to look like, and then making sure they understand what their roles and responsibilities are in getting us to this point. So bringing parents in and making sure that parents understand the experiences that their children will be going through. Again, training our children to letting them know what they'll be going through. And then, our teachers already know what we're going through, but offering them opportunities to make sure that they can receive the appropriate training and appropriate resources to build their capacity, to make sure, again, that this is going to be a sustainable part of our culture.
And I'm going to ask him if we could go to the next slide, please. I was going to ask Rodney a bit about sustainability. I think we've touched on that. I want to address that a bit through the next slide, which WestEd utilizes a tracker system to help support the school. Of course, folks within your own schools and schools that you work with may use something else, but the tracker system allows us to identify and track each of the action steps. In this case, the school currently has about 45 different action steps that are being worked on by the implementation teams. As you see, this snapshot of the screen was taken a couple weeks back, and the work was just getting underway in the implementation teams. I think at this point they're about 25% complete. Just gives you an idea about just how much work has taken place in the last couple of weeks. Next slide, please. Again, just by way of a snapshot, the tracker system allows the school to focus on goals, strategies, and then specific action items. It allows for a drill down to identify a person responsible, start time, and an end time. So again, that's the process that WestEd is using in this school, but certainly with your school, other schools that you are working with, certainly important to make sure that you finish what you start. Next slide. Again, as those action items are being completed, WestEd again is supporting Nathaniel Rochester Community School with tracking their progress in the project management system, and then of course this will lead into an evaluation where we can take a look at what was successful, what wasn't successful. Next slide.
So this is Kathy Dunn, and in terms of implementing the Common Core, a focus on effective instruction, of course, is a key. And Rochester has chosen to use the framework for teaching developed by Charlotte Danielson as the common language and instructional framework that will help guide that conversation, both in terms of the needs assessment that Terry mentioned earlier, where we did some classroom observations, looking at classrooms to just take a snapshot. We gathered data, coded the data based on the framework for teaching, and that information then was fed back. It gave Rodney and his staff an opportunity to say, at this moment in time, here's what we know about certain aspects of effective instruction that are in place. To follow from that, if you could push to the next slide, please. We will be doing an institute for educators in Rochester this summer. It will be a 3-day institute whereby we will deepen the collective and shared understanding of the framework for teaching. And we will do that, as you can see in this very quick sketch of the institute, by deepening people's in day one frame for first starting what they already know about good teaching, giving them an overview of the framework, and then beginning to look at this idea of levels of performance in a way that frames that conversation so people could see it's really about teacher growth and professional learning as a primary piece. In the rest of day one and in most of day two, people will have a deeper treatment in each of the 4 domains of teaching. And at the end of day two, we start beginning to enhancing skills that evaluators, administrators have with regard to coaching and how to have conversation about data that's gathered.
Thanks, Kathy.
You're welcome.
I know if anyone has any questions about what Kathy shared, please feel free to type them into the chat. And I think we're just coming towards the end. So Terry and Rodney, thank you so much. And participants, before you leave us, we wanted you to share quickly what lessons do you think you need to be mindful of as you think about going on such a journey as we heard today in your own schools. And if you could type that in for us, and we'll also quickly push out a survey. But back to you, Terry and Rodney and Bob, to wrap up.
Thank you so much to everybody who participated. Please do put your questions into the chat area, and we'll do our best to get back to you. I was wondering, Kathy, if we could tap into your expertise a little bit more. If you could tell us a little bit about how we go about it's that balancing act. How do we go about providing teachers feedback and make it reflective versus it always feeling to the teachers that it's evaluative?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. Well, eventually, people, of course, will be assessed in terms of their teaching practice, but most of the time, the conversation, which can represent a shift between evaluators and teachers, will be first evaluators being trained around the framework and deepening their skills at gathering data and having reflective conversations. When evaluators gather the data, they'll share it with the teacher, and rather than what might have been in the past, evaluators interpreting the data and telling the teachers what they saw, instead, teachers will be invited to interpret the data and have a collaborative dialogue with evaluators so that teachers themselves can start to interpret the data. And the reason that that's so important is that then teachers can become more intentional in their practice and really think about decisions that they made in a given lesson, what they might do differently, and how they, in fact, are implementing the Common Core effectively.
Wonderful. So it sounds like what Rodney was talking about, of instilling this inquiry-based culture in the school for students. Really, we're instilling that inquiry-based culture for adults as well. We are inquiring into our own practice and how well it works and how we can change and what we can learn. So it's an inquiry-based culture for all, not just for the students.
Exactly. We need to make sure that we provide teachers with the opportunities they're expected to provide their students.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Terry and Rodney, thank you so much for leading us through this telling of your story, of your journey, and we all wish you the best of luck in your ongoing journey, and we hope to be able to get back in touch with you again in the future and hear how things are going.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
So, Bob, I think as we end off, I think we offered if folks have a question they want to ask over the phone, they can unmute their phone. In the meanwhile, we'd really like to let you know where you can find out more information, and here's the resources at our own wested.org. We have, in the Wested bookstore, resource store, we have a whole section on Common Core implementation, and we shared some other resources today. And we also have contact information here, please. Matthew, do you want to step in and share some of this information out with folks as we push out the survey and ask folks to post any final questions and thoughts?
Sure thing, Julie. I'd be happy to. So I just want to thank our presenters. I know I learned a tremendous amount, and obviously, you know, there's a long road ahead of us, but the work is really exciting. And I would just like to say, for those folks on the phone, if you're interested in learning more about how Wested can be a partner with your school or district or organization, moving down this journey of Common Core implementation, educator effectiveness, school improvement and turnaround, all the sort of things that we've heard going on today, please let us know. We'd be happy to work with you. You can email us at commoncore@wested.org. You can also download some free resources. We have a lot of free knowledge publications and best practice guides at commoncore.wested.org. And finally, a great way to stay in touch with kind of the cutting-edge work and the emerging learnings that Wested is discovering in the field is to sign up for our R&D alert and our e-bulletin. And you can do that by visiting wested.org/subscribe. And I do hope you'll stay in touch with us, because we really are continuing on this exciting journey, and we'd love to be in touch with you more.
So thank you all. The handouts will be available in the box. We just posted that in the folder. As we do have related resources from today's presentation as well. And we invite you now to give us your feedback, and please feel free to share any final questions and comments as we end off. The session is being recorded, so you can share this also with your colleagues and review afterwards. So please give us your feedback in the survey that's shown on the left as we end off today. And if you would like to make a comment or ask a question over the phone, please feel free to do that right now. So if I go down the list, if you want to say a comment or question, just hit *6 to unmute your phone. That would be fantastic, and we'd like to hear from you. And again, thank you to our guest presenter for sharing his school journey, and thank you, Terry, Bob, and Kathy. So does anyone have a quick comment or thought that they'd like to either type into the chat as one last review and or unmute your phone to share it? And we'll also post in the information that was in the slide that Matthew just shared about follow-up contact information. Realize on the East Coast it's really late. It's around 5, so we'll thank you. Is there any final thoughts, Bob, Terry, and Rodney, as we say thank you to you all again, and Kathy, as we end today's presentation?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thanks again.
Thank you, and keep us posted. It's very exciting. We're really excited for you all. So thank you, everyone, and please stay in touch. And we just Common Core at wested.org if you want more information, and we wish you all the best and the great work you're doing out there. Thank you all, and we're officially ending today's webinar, but please keep in contact if you have further questions. Bye all.